My name's Dylan Green. I am an employee at Wacos, but I'm also a board member for Transfolk of WA. And I'm here to talk to you all a bit about IDAHOBIT, which is on May 17th. And thank you very much for having me. So IDAHOBIT itself stands for the International Day Against Homophobia, Biophobia, Intersexism and Transphobia, but it's really come to mean the International Day Against Discrimination for all members of the LGBTQIA+ community. The reason it's celebrated on May 17th is because back in 1990, May 17th was the day that the World Health Organization finally removed homosexuality from its classification of diseases. So homosexuality was no longer recognised as a mental illness. It's an important day for the queer community because it raises awareness of the discrimination that's still faced against many people of the community. Even though homosexuality was removed from the classification of diseases in 1990, we still had homosexuality criminalised in Australia until 1997, and same-sex marriage still wasn't legal up until around 5 years ago. So it just brings a day for organisations like yourself and for the general public to talk about the issues that the queer community face and raise awareness of kind of the discrimination, hardships, and also the celebrations of the community. For me personally, I think it's really important for people to realise that even though homosexuality is not a mental illness anymore, it's not illegal anymore, we have a lot more rights in the queer community than we did back in the 90s. We don't have enough rights. 34 years have passed since the first IDAHOBIT, but we're still facing discrimination every day in the community. The LGBTQIA+ community members are significantly higher risk of mental health issues, homelessness, things like that. Discrimination is still faced by members of the community every day. For the wider queer community, we have about 4 times the rate of suicide attempts to non-queer people. And for the trans community, almost 50% of trans people in Australia have attempted suicide at one time or another. So although we have these days to celebrate the good things that have changed, it's really important as well to still acknowledge that things are not where they should be for a number of reasons, whether it's government, systematic, whether it's just social. Really important for me, and that's why I like coming to talk to organisations like you guys, because it's about making everyone in the community aware of the issues that we face on a larger basis, I guess. I remember realising that I was a bit different from most at about 12 or 13, but I guess trans or transgender wasn't a word I'd ever heard before. It took me kind of a number of years before I met the first trans person that I ever met. I think I was about 16, and I remember meeting a trans person for the first time and thinking, no, that can't be it. That's not what I'm like. That we're very different people. You know, that was my only experience, I guess. It took me more than another decade to actually kind of accept that part of myself and start my transition. So I started my transition when I was 27. I worked for a community service organisation, and that was a really good experience for me, but not all experiences are the same. You know, I'm quite privileged when you look at, I guess, the trans community. I have a job, I have an education behind me, and don't have to experience a lot of things that younger trans people do, for example. But I did have some experiences that weren't so great as well. I was 27 when I came out, and that led to me not having any contact with my family for about 4 years because they just didn't understand and didn't really accept that part of who I was. I did have a partner at the time who was not the most supportive, but I did have friends around me who I could lean on. I guess I have spent most of my career in the community sector. I started working when I was graduated uni at a homeless service. I've worked in an organisation very similar to RISE, quite a large disability service provider. And when I started my transition, I worked in disability services, and I was very, very lucky that my workplace was very open, maybe not very knowledgeable, but definitely very supportive of my journey. Staff on the large part were really good with using my name. They changed systems, but things became clear that they didn't know how to do, I guess, and that's a journey that I took with them, and I must say that they did really well. I've worked at other places since that I didn't have that same experience. So since then, I've worked in government organisations, for example, where it was pretty common to openly be somewhat homophobic, and some more male kind of dominated fields where that was the norm. I think in community services, there is a lot more openness and a lot more acceptance of all different diversities. Since I, worked at that organisation, I've had a few different roles in organisations where I just didn't necessarily feel safe to be myself. It's a pretty widely accepted fact that almost 70% of the queer community don't feel safe to be out in their workplace. And there's a lot of different reasons behind that, but I know for me personally, I just didn't want people to suddenly view me differently. I'm as much a guy as the guy sitting at the desk next to you. Really, my gender and my gender journey shouldn't have very much to do with what I do for work. It's not really relevant. And when I've had people kind of ask me inappropriate questions and things like that in the past, I find that the best way to kind of turn people off that line of questioning is to really just ask them, I guess, what they specifically want to know about my genitals, because that's really the question they're asking at that point, right? When I'm sitting in an office doing my day job, nothing about my gender really has anything to do with it. But I guess, in my current workplace is the first place since I transitioned that I've worked and I've been fully out as trans. When I first started, I wasn't that comfortable. Again, I just didn't want people to treat me differently. But I very quickly learned that Waycross is a really diverse organisation and really inclusive, but it also gave me the opportunity to speak about my experiences, and particularly last year when there was a lot of kind of anti-trans political movement happening, I was given the opportunity to talk about my personal experience and share some of the moments I've had and why people should be concerned about sort of the political uprising. A lot of people don't understand the experience of trans people because less than a third of Australians have ever knowingly met a trans person, is what they think. We don't measure the size of the trans community. We, even the ABS struggle to measure the size of the queer community in general. So really a lot's just not known, and people are scared of the unknown, I guess. For example, the kind of things that people don't realise is I wasn't born in Australia. I was actually born in the UK. So even though I'm a citizen, I've lived here for, 20 years of my life, more than 20 years of my life. The government here still recognises me as female. And I guess if you're watching this video, you can make your own judgment, but 90% of the time, most people don't look at me and think that I'm female. So, for example, I was going to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, went through airport security and went into the scanner. They have these full body scanners now. So I stood in the scanner with my arms up in a little position that you've got to do. And they scanned me, walked out. Oh no, go back in, walk out, go back in. Scanned me 3 times before they eventually said, oh, can you head over to this booth? And I was kind of looking around like, oh, what's happening? Do they think I'm a drug smuggler? I don't know. And what it turned out is they had looked at my ID, looked at my ticket, seen female, and when you go into those scanners, there's a little button that the person on the side of it presses that says male or female. When they showed me the scan, like what they had shown as suspicious on my body, the first 2 scans highlighted my chest area and my kind of hips and buttock area, and they explained to me that basically what it does is takes a scan of your body and sees if it aligns with the general shape of the gender that they've selected. So because they selected female, it's highlighted that I don't have breasts because I've had surgery and that my body shape isn't typically female. The third time they put me through the scanner, they selected male, and probably the most uncomfortable but hilarious interaction I've ever had was when he showed me the scan and all it had was a bright red box around my genitals. So I had to be patted down and, you know, taken to a room because they can't pat you down in public if it's a private area. And, you know, when I said to the guy, oh, I'm actually trans, so, well, you know, male is correct, but technically I'm legally female, he kind of patted me down very quickly and was like, yeah, you're fine. Obviously was quite understanding. In hindsight, yeah, it's kind of funny and I have a sense of humor about it, but in reality, I was very lucky. I was actually traveling with trans folk in WA, so the 4 people that I was with were all trans or non-binary and were kind of like, oh, yep, here we go again. That's normal. So, you know, it was the safest I could have been, I guess, in that environment. But really, you know, just being asked to kind of step away and then being taken into a private room and having to kind of wonder, okay, why am I going into this room? What's going on? They explain it to you, but it's still a pretty terrifying situation. And I guess most people, luckily, don't have to experience being taken into a room at airport security, but there's people with guns and it's a pretty terrifying experience. And although I'm now at the point where I'm really confident about my identity, I can only imagine if that had happened to me 5 years ago, I would have probably burst into tears. I would have been terrified. I wouldn't have known how to explain myself. And it's simple things, you know, people don't realize that, oh, your driver's license, it doesn't actually list your gender on your driver's license. But if you get pulled over by the police or if you're short at airport security, their system shows what your gender is. So, you know, I always have that fear of what if I get pulled over by the police and he happens to be homophobic or transphobic? Are they going to look at me and then look at my ID and wonder where the mismatch is? You know, something simple that we all get to enjoy, like a holiday to Bali. I went to Bali back in March and had the same issue at airport security in Perth airport. But thank God, they don't do body scans at Bali airport. So, you know, I could have had a very, very different experience in a country that it's illegal to be transgender. It's illegal to cross-dress there. It's illegal to be gay. You know, theoretically, you could be arrested for something that you can't change. It really makes me no different to anyone else. Actually, probably the funniest part of my transition when I worked at the disability provider I was telling you about was the bathrooms, because I never had the need to obviously use a male toilet prior to my transition. But I noticed that very quickly realized that the majority of the men in the building were from the kind of maintenance crew and therapists and things like that. And they had this really fun habit of going into a cubicle and urinating without closing the door behind them. So I then had to have this conversation with my boss about, hey, do you think someone could have a chat to the guys? Because I keep walking into cubicles and nearly bumping into them while they're going to the bathroom with the door open. And, you know, they're all kind of shocked as I was to like, well, why aren't they closing the door? And I was like, I have no idea. And I get this, I still have this picture in my head of the chief people officer took it upon herself to go and kind of talk to all of the different groups that had men in the team and have the conversation about how they had to close the cubicle doors. And apparently for her, it was kind of horrifying and hilarious at the same time. And just that picture of her walking around in her suit and heels talking to all the guys is great. It's not always that, you know. One thing that kind of always springs to mind when people talk about bathrooms and transgender people is the arguments that J.K. Rowling makes. And I say J.K. Rowling because she's a really famous kind of person, but a lot of other people are making the same arguments that, people, specifically men, will transition to female just to gain access to women's bathrooms. And I guess there's a few things. A, that seems like a ridiculously difficult way to go about getting access to a woman's bathroom. But B, the primary thing that people focus on is go to the bathroom of the gender you were assigned at birth. Okay, so you want trans women to put themselves at risk by going into a male bathroom, even though they might look completely female. That point aside, you know, if you're really that scared for your safety and your children's safety in female bathrooms, do you want me walking into a female bathroom? And I always think that always think about the day that someone who really supports that argument about using the bathroom at the gender you're assigned at birth, what they would think if I then walked into their bathroom while they were standing there with their 5 or 6-year-old daughter. They're going to see me as a risk, but also it's what they want. So, the bathroom debate is always a funny one to me because, yep, I understand that there's this fear, although I think it's completely irrational because it's a very difficult way to go about it. There's a fear that, men are going to be faking their transition to try and get you in a bathroom. I don't know. I think, if you actually had a look at statistics, you'd probably find that if men really want to attack you in a bathroom, they're going to go into a bathroom and attack you, regardless of what they look like. But also B, you got to look at the other side of the coin, and you got to think about people who, you've probably met, you've probably walked past in the street hundreds of times and never known that you're walking past a trans man, and think about what they would look like walking into your bathroom and how safe you would feel then. For me, I've had a few interesting experiences. Before I transitioned, when I was like 18, I actually got a lifetime ban from a nightclub for using the female toilets. Before I transitioned, when I was living my life as female, if you don't feel safe going into a men's toilet, or if you don't feel safe going into a women's toilet, use the accessible toilet. And, this has come up even in my workplace at the moment. Wacos office is in a building that's owned by a different company, and I raised the fact that there's no bins in the men's toilets. So if anyone is ever in need of menstrual supplies or anything like that, they have to put them in their pocket and walk back into their office to dispose of them. When I raised that with the building management, they said, oh, no, it would be too expensive to provide bins in the men's toilets because we'd have to do it on every floor. I mean, for me, it's not an issue, but I don't know if there's other trans people in the building who might need access to that. And if I've noticed, they've definitely noticed. So what their advice was, oh, just use the accessible toilet. That has a bin. And I said back to them, okay, that's a solution. But what if someone in a wheelchair needs the bathroom and I'm in there for no good reason? I don't need to use that accessible bathroom for any legitimate reason, apart from the fact that you don't want to spend money on bins. I just never got a response to that email, so I still don't know. That was like 6 months ago. We'll see. Maybe we'll get bins one day. I guess there's two different aspects. You've got on one side the staff and colleagues that work in the community services sector. And then on the other side, you've got people that these organisations support. So in terms of differences that staff should be aware of among colleagues and things like that in the industry, really it's just about making yourself more aware. So a lot of the kind of problem, I think, in many organisations is that people don't have education or training. People don't know to reach out to people like the champions for the queer community in any organisation, or resources that their organisation might provide. If they're not specifically trained, or if they don't feel like their training kind of covered enough, they might not know how to deal with these issues. And when it comes to your colleagues, really it's about being aware that, not everyone is married to someone of the opposite sex. So if someone refers to their wife and they're female, to not immediately be shocked by that. It's just kind of being aware that people exist. And I guess as an organisation, for any community service organisation, I think it's really important to support your staff if they're going through a transition, or if they're, part of the LGBT community and they raise concerns about anything in the workplace. When it comes to people you support, I think, the community services industry as a whole supports people from probably the most diversity that you could imagine, right? You've got people in all different industries from all different walks of life. And I think one of the kind of biggest problems is this connotation or connection that the community services industry has previously had with the religious community. I think that kind of puts fear into people in the queer community, into their heart, because they worry that they're going to be discriminated against because of religious persecution, which, some organizations may have been started by churches 50, 100 years ago, and they're no longer connected. But from the outside, people don't know that. It depends on who the person is. And that's the main thing I would always want to say, is that people are still individuals. So I can't sit here and say, oh, I'm a trans person, so I'll tell you how you should support trans people. One of the things that I really strongly advocate for is that you treat everyone as an individual, but you have awareness of differences that they may have in their care needs. You know, for example, when I worked in disability, we had a trans client. He preferred personal care services to be given by a female support worker. That wasn't our standard practice. He was legally male, he had changed his gender. Our standard practice is that people were given personal care by a person of the same gender. But obviously that doesn't apply to every situation. So really, we went through this journey of having to look at everything from how we intake clients into our service, how we match them with support workers or choose appropriate support workers. And it started this conversation of, okay, as an organization, we might not be prepared to deal with anything that comes up. You know, you never know what's going to come up. But if we start that conversation on intake or on assessment, and we start the conversation about, okay, you know, introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Dylan. I use he, him pronouns. That immediately signals to someone in the queer community that you're at least aware of something like pronouns, which is a lot more than most people can say. Starting a conversation like that gives you an opportunity to show that person, to signal to that person that if they use gender neutral pronouns, or if they identify as queer, or if they have any sort of difference that they want to tell you about, any sort of diversity in their life, they can talk to you about that. And then it's about, you know, if someone shares with you, oh, I use they, them pronouns, keep that in your mind, because when it gets to talking about the kind of support they might need, you should always thank them for telling you anything. You know, if they tell you they're gay, if they tell you they're trans, if they tell you anything about their life, thank them for sharing that with you, and then ask, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for the services that we can provide you? Because it's, you know, you can't assume that every gay person, every trans person, every non-binary person is going to have the same needs. It's about thinking, okay, this person has told me A, what does that mean for B, C, D, you know, the services we provide, how we treat them, how we refer to them. I think one of the big issues systematically across community services, which is not something that, you know, one individual can fix, is that a lot of the systems that we use just don't have the real space to deal with these differences. So, you know, I've used computer programs that have legal name and preferred name, but then everything shows up as legal name. We've had systems that, you know, do offer a place for preferred pronouns, but it's not shown on the client's kind of main page of their profile. So what use is it? Those kind of things need to be flagged. You know, there should always be a place for sex and a place for gender, because they're not always the same. Gender's a spectrum, sex is not so much a spectrum. When it comes to sex assigned at birth, that may indicate certain requirements, but it only indicates those requirements if you also take into account gender and how someone identifies. And when you're providing support to people, especially, you know, personal support, or when you're providing even social support where you are that only person's connection to the outside world, sometimes it's really important to be aware of these things and to educate yourself, and for organizations to be able to make that information available. Allyship is a really important thing for the queer community. So I'm glad you asked how we can show people that we're allies. For, you know, your work colleagues, for the people you support, allyship can be the same. It can be really simple. It can be really complex. One thing that I always recommend is introducing yourself with your pronouns so that people know that you're aware and that you're accepting if they use pronouns that are a bit different, either different to how they look or different to kind of the standard he, him, she, her pronouns. Having your pronouns in your email signature signals to people that you're emailing outside of your organization or within your organization that, Rise is an accepting place, and we are allies and it's safe to talk to us. Showing that you're a welcoming person is actually something that's really easy to accomplish. Something really simple like wearing a rainbow pin on your lanyard or your shirt immediately signals to someone in the LGBTQIA+ community that you're welcoming of. Respect can be a really easy one as well. Using something simple like someone's preferred pronouns or their preferred name is something you can do to show someone respect. If you ever make a mistake with pronouns, also not over-apologizing. So if you make a mistake and use the incorrect pronouns, apologize and quickly move on. If you make a big deal of it and really start over-apologizing, what you end up doing is asking them to comfort you for the mistake you've made. Just say, "Oh, sorry about that," and move on using the correct pronouns to show them that you respect them. I think a really good indicator of integrity is using someone's preferred name, preferred pronouns, referring to them in the correct gender when you're with them, but also when you're talking about them. I think a lot of people can kind of mask and, talk to the person they're supporting using the correct pronouns or name, but then behind their back might talk about them in their dead name or use the wrong pronouns or gender. And I think to show integrity, using someone's preferred name and things like that in every situation is a really good step. Optimism can be hard sometimes. If you've watched all of the little bits of these videos that I've done, it might be really easy to think, wow, things seem really bad, discrimination's still out there. Mental health statistics and outcomes for the queer community are really poor. But, things are changing. It might be slow, but things are changing. Recently, they just introduced a new legislation which will ban gender reassignment board, for example. The government is slowly making changes to legislation which protect the rights of queer people. And there's always something to be optimistic about, Things do get better. Things are getting better every day. It just takes time.